Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let's get right to this mail. It's titled "Fans versus Weirdos Who Send Death Threats to Creators." You got me with the title. It's catchy. I don't think, by the way, the people, the weirdos, who send death threats to creators, and honestly, I think that's very kind to the weirdos to call them just weirdos. I don't think they're battling the fans, but I do think they get in the way of fans. Meaning, I think there's people who just want to enjoy comics. And then there's lunatics. But let's read this mail. It says, "Hey, Dear Perch, hope you're doing well. Recently, X-Force by Jeff Thorne was canceled, which is a shame. That is a good book. So he took to CBR Forum to talk about it. By the way, I feel some guilt. Like, I used to talk to Jeff Thorne a lot on this channel. Not really in a position where I can do stuff like that right now. But I feel like I should have done a lot more to help promote his book. I've definitely want to do everything I can to help promote Joe Casey's book. It's a really good book, The Weapon X-Men. But X-Force was a good book. And look, I don't have the reach or the power on this show to be a drop in the bucket for either of those two books. But I do think that's not me asking for a compliment either. It's truth. But something more should be done. These are good titles, and you read some of the titles. Like I read through a bunch of Marvel books. I mean, look, I need to do a summary of them, but I'll give you a quick. West Coast Avengers spent the entire book with an argument, a bit of an explanation of good Ultron, a kiss, and some really terrible dialogue. Iron Man was just unthinkably terrible. You've got The Fantastic Four, a book people really like, was a comic book about inventing a food source for vampires. Like, I'm just, what the hell? Anyway, that's a video for another time. But these books, X-Force is a good book. Anyway. It says, okay, back to this. So recently X-Force by Jeff Thorne was canceled, so he took to CBR Forum to talk about it. While doing that, he talked about how the Green Lantern fandom isn't decent and full of psychos and whatnot. I'm paraphrasing, but I'll send you the OG post as well as a conversation I mentioned at the end of the mail. He did, the writer did. It's an attachment. I, as an X-fan, read his X-Force run, so was checking on what he had to say because I wanted to know if they're going to relaunch or not, but instead I saw that as a Green Lantern fan, I'm being attacked for no apparent reason. So I took to Blue Sky and talked about that, and Thorne saw my post. We had a discussion that basically was him calling me a liar who made up the story. I told him this picture I shared shows the post from his account, which he then replied multiple times to, basically stating GL fans were sending him death threats and whatnot. So I said there's a difference between a fan and a weirdo online who threaten people, to which he replied saying they're both the same thing. Thus my post is me lying. Somehow, me sharing his own post and saying my opinion on it is me making up lies. I don't. It's a shame. I don't know the context there. I'll have more to say on this in a minute. But if so, that's not fair. That's not fair sporting on Jeff's part by any stretch of the imagination. Anyway, back to the mail. Is that sentiment that fans or weirdos are the same thing shared amongst creators, thus they treat fans like shit? Or is this one person situation? And if so, how do we overcome it? Since, frankly, I don't want to be associated with weirdos in statements made by professionals, since most fans read a book, close it, store it, and not think about how I should go bash a creator because it's bad. I just go on with my life. Sorry for long mail, and thanks for what you do. Had to edit screenshots with the email, but don't worry, the text is unaltered. And unless Thor replied, don't get notified. Okay. I'm not going to read I can't tell what's an email here and what's from Blue Sky, so I'm going to ignore that for the sake of this video. But you asked a bunch of questions there, and so there's a lot to unpack. First off, let me just say that sorry, I'm there's literally a truck driving into my lane here. God, Texas, fucking Texas. Anyway, that's me attacking all drivers right there. Sorry, tongue in cheek. All right, so look, like I said before in the middle, or earlier in the video, I've had Jeff on this channel many times. I like Jeff. I think he's a good guy. I think he has good insights, good information. I think that he's funny, he's sarcastic, and I think he makes mistakes. And I think that, I'm not trying to downplay it or whitewash it. Some of you will claim I'm doing that. But I don't, there is a significant difference between a fan and a weirdo online. I can understand how a creator can blur those two together because, again, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I understand it. There's a difference between the two. When you're online and people are screaming at you, the loud voices win. Unfortunately, that's the way the world works. It's very much the same thing as you get a creator who's sending a picture of his butthole to someone and flaming out, calling people Nazis, blocking people, then, making fun of them behind the blog, urging their followers to go attack that person. There are creators who do that. Dan Slott does that. There's a ton of other creators who do not, who just, create books. They don't get involved in that shit. And as I've said on this channel many, many times before, more creators aren't doing that than are. But you can't blame the fans for being irritated at creators as a whole, because one or two kind of lunatic creators tends to spoil the whole bunch. I feel like I'm in the middle on a lot of this because I've had this conversation with creators many times. They're like, well, yeah, Mark, this is a actual conversation with a creator that goes, well, yeah, Mark Waid is a lunatic and he posts dumb shit and I wish he didn't do that and everything else. But, I don't do that. Why are the fans pissed at me? I don't do that. I'm just trying to write comics. It's like, you're right. You are. But one loud asshole is equivalent to 100 normal people. And that's just how we absorb information. So conversely, a handful of asshole weirdo fans who are making death threats and doing other crazy shit, if you're a creator, if you're on the receiving end of that, you start to look at everyone who interacts with you as bad. And what this does is it trains human behavior to do weird, dumb things. So have you ever seen the fan or the person on Twitter who's just like a bootlicking sycophant? They're like, I love everything you do. I love everything. You are the best. Everything you make is great. And you think, there's no way this fan actually thinks this way, because nothing is great. Not everything. No, sorry, nothing is great. Not everything is great. Big fan of Chris Claremont's X-Men. Are there stinkers in that run? Absolutely there are. Absolutely. There's no such thing as, batting 1,000. You do. There's good issues, there's bad issues, there's mediocre issues. So when you see somebody that's just like completely fawning over every breath somebody takes, a lot of that's human conditioning. It's human conditioning because of this situation. If you come in and say, hey, this issue is kind of boring to a creator, and it was, like, okay, Ryan North's recent Fantastic Four, like I mentioned earlier. It's a comic about how Doom is, in power, but they don't really do much with Doom. There's some really eye-rolling stuff where they're clearly doing a parallel between Doom and Trump. They've got a family and they've got a yard and there's got a bunch of Doom signs in the yard. It's like, all right. At least they made it green and not red. I mean, like Jerry Duggan's making the signs red for Orcus. It's just clearly an analog. The majority issue, though, is that there's a vampire family and people are hunting down the vampires or chasing the vampires. And Reed Richards gets to the lab and makes food so the vampires can eat food and not, be crazy. That's basically a quick summary of the issue. It's not a good issue. It's just not. Now that's an opinion, mine. But it's not great. Are there other issues in Fantastic Four that Ryan North has done that are better? Yes, there are. They parts of that run are been good. Parts of the run have been bad. But we're in a world where you've got a couple weirdos or a handful of weirdos. How many? 10%, 5%? I don't know. Whatever it is, 5% weirdos feels and sounds like 90% weirdos to the creator. They're screaming away. And then you've got a bunch of fans who are like, I like this issue. I don't like this issue, like a normal person. But the creator will quickly lump anything that sounds remotely negative in with the death threats and in with the other stuff. And the creator, and again, it doesn't make it right, but I understand it. The creator will take that for a while and eventually pop off and go, fuck all of you. That's basically what they're going to do. And they're going to go nuts. Guy I like immensely, Philip Kennedy Johnson. I met him at shows. I like him. He's a kind guy. He's a soft-spoken guy. He's an example of somebody, if you've looked at kind of some of the things that go on social media, of what happens when a handful of weirdos just push and push and push and push and push and push and push. And finally he's like, fuck, enough. and he pops off, and he popped off at some people who are not weirdos. And they're like, what the hell, man? I've never seen it. Again, another guy who thinks one of the nicest guys in the world, Jim Zub. Some people came on this channel, say Jim Zub yelled at me. I was horrified to hear that, by the way. I'll tell you, he read the comments on my video. He's like, I don't know who that person was. He felt bad. Like he didn't know this situation. But it happens. It happens when you get pushed and pushed and pushed. It doesn't make it right. You shouldn't lose your temper. If you have a really horrible day at work and you're pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and you go home at night and you're just stressed out, and your kid does something, breaks a glass or something, and you fly off the handle, it's understandable why that happens. It doesn't make it okay that you were yelling at your kid. That, both things can be true at the same time. I don't know if that's exactly the situation here. I'm just, explaining it. I do, some creators see fans and weirdos as the same thing. Eventually they start to, and that sucks. And ultimately that hurts their own career. It hurts comics. I mean, the thing about all this is it's all self-destructive. When you fly off the handle at somebody, you lose your temper. It's self-destructive for you. And so it isn't helpful when this stuff happens. And the worst part about all this in my mind is that the bad actors, the creators who will go on and call people Nazis and block, again, Dan Slott, some of his behavior is absolutely abhorrent. If I was his boss, I would fire him. He will call people names. He will then block them. From behind the block, he will continue to call their names. He will urge, and I'm sorry, this is not exaggerating. He will urge people to go off and shit on the person he's attacking. Every now and then he'll come out from under block so he can respond or retweet or do something to further kind of crap on this guy. And he thinks it's funny. I can tell you firsthand at a show, he's talked about this being funny. This is his entertainment. And fuck it, he should lose his job for that. The majority of creators are not like that. The majority of creators are not going online and saying, because Trump won and a majority of you voted for him, I don't think I can write superheroes anymore. It's just this, it's stupid to say things like that. They get, like I said, they get some delight off of this. It's how they get attention. It's how they, make up for their tiny egos. It's how they, compensate for a tiny dick. I don't know what is the root causes. Who knows? At the same time, there are fans who do the same shit. They will also go on and send death threats. To your point, in the mail, the weirdos online who send death threats, they are looking for a reaction. The people are both on if you look at the Ed Piscor situation, you had a handful of creators, you had a handful of fans who pushed and 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 made slanderous videos, talked about canceling the guy, talked to their comic book buddies, talked to other creators, talked to other fans. You had a handful of people, and they're the exact fucking same thing. Okay? The jackass loser who makes videos talking about, wanting to cancel Ed and joking about him being groomer and all that kind of stuff is no different than the Alex DeCampi horseshit that's going on doing the same thing. It does not matter that one is a creator and one is a fan. Both of them are taking a perverse glee in screwing somebody over, which in that case led to somebody's death. That's the consequence. They have blood on their hands. I am aggravated by the same, bad actors, creators and fans who bend over backwards and say it's the other person's fault. Oh, well, it's the creators that did this for them because they have a louder voice. They have more of a voice. Yeah, they do not. I'm sorry. You have some of these people have YouTube channels with like 100,000 subscribers. You're telling me you have less of a voice than Alex DeCampi, who has like jack shit and begs for money from time to time? Come on. But look, we're not going to measure like who's the bigger scumbag. You're both scumbags. And the consequence of this is, and again, I'm taking it on face value, you've got a creator in Jeff Thorne, who is a funny guy. You can go back and listen to some of the streams on my channel talking about it. He loves comics. The one thing you got to admit about that guy, he knows his comics and he loves comics. He knows his history, which is better than a lot of other people. And it is fun to talk to. You got a guy like that. You have fans who are going online disappointed that a title's getting canceled and wanting to, chat about comics. And because of the dumbass shenanigans that go on, everything's getting lumped together. And I've had people at times accuse this channel of being the fence sitter or the seeing both sides. Yeah, that if you're hearing that right now, you're missing some of the point. Because if we're going to talk about two sides and seeing both sides, it's not fans and creators and who's right and who's wrong between both. It's weirdos and normal people. Those are the two groups. And it turns out in the weirdos group, there are fans and there are creators in the weirdos group. It turns out there are fans and creators in the normal group. And so in terms of taking a side, I like to take a side to the normal group. I'd like to be able to say a comic is boring, because sometimes they are. That issue of the X-Men where the girl X-Men did a shopping trip, and that's where Jubilee was first introduced. Chris Claremont wrote that. It wasn't a good issue. Yes, it introduced Jubilee, but it wasn't a good comic. Again, all my opinion. But I should be able to say that and not have Chris Claremont call me a Nazi and not have other X fans say I'm a betrayer of all things X. I happen to love these issues. I have several of them great and framed in my house, including the X-Men #1. That was the Claremont issue, of course. But I love this comic. I love this title. Loving the title, loving the characters, loving things doesn't mean you love everything that happens within it. It means sometimes those issues are going to be boring. It happens. We can't live in that completely binary world. Both things are true. But we need to start changing, I think, the dynamic. And again, I have a tiny YouTube channel. It is, if I screamed about woke every day, I would have more subscribers. But I also have weirdo subscribers. So I'm sorry. My audience would be a bunch of dumbasses. For those of you who are here, the conversation, that sounds stupid. It's like, I don't like Cody Rhodes, by the way. I just don't like him. I'm sorry. He's always like, what are we going to talk about? Fuck off, Cody. Anyway, sorry. Look, I think the thing that needs to happen is we need to stop thinking about this as fans versus creators. And we need to start talking about this as weirdos versus normal people. Okay. Do you do death threats? Weirdo. Do you scream and call, a customer of yours a Nazi? You're a weirdo. Do you bully somebody until they eventually commit suicide? Weirdo, probably criminal. I'm relatively sure everybody listening to this right now can, figure out the difference between the two. But I don't really care whether you write comics, draw comics, read comics, sell comics, buy comics. If you're doing some of these weirdo things, fuck off. You're the weirdo. We don't need you. Whoever you are. Thanks for listening.